Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi was killed in a helicopter crash yesterday, along with the country's foreign minister, Hussein Amir Abdullahian. The two men were confirmed dead this morning after it was announced that the helicopter carrying them made a difficult landing in a mountain region in northwestern Iran yesterday afternoon. It remains unknown what caused the crash. Search and rescue teams are at the scene of the wreckage.
Raisi's death comes just 1 month after Iran, under Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, launched hundreds of drone and missile attacks on Israel. That was in retaliation for an Israeli attack on an Iranian facility in Damascus. The strikes from Iran were the first launched directly from Iranian soil, and they further escalated tensions with the United States amid Israel's ongoing war against Hamas. With Raisi's death, Khamenei lost a long-time ally. And after the death was confirmed, Khamenei announced 5 days of national mourning. And he appointed Mohammad Mokbar, the first vice president of Iran, as the new acting president. A Turkish television channel broadcast debris from the helicopter on the ground from the scene of the crash.
Militia group Hezbollah weighed in on Raisi's death, praising him as, quote, a big brother, a strong supporter, and a staunch defender of our issues and the nation's issues. President Joe Biden has not yet weighed in on the helicopter crash, but the European Union sent its sincere condolences to the families of those killed. Now, joining us now to weigh in on this and how it could affect conflict in the Middle East going forward is Executive Vice President at the Quincy Institute of Responsible Statecraft, Trita Parsi. Welcome back. All right, Trita, can you help us understand what the broader implications of this death might be, of these deaths, I should say?
Well, I think, first of all, geopolitically, we should not be expecting any particular changes. This is not going to impact Iran's relationship with Hezbollah, with Hamas, its opposition to Israel, or its warm-up in ties with Saudi Arabia, or its position on the nuclear front. Rather, this is going to have significant implications internally for the country. There's going to be elections within the next 50 days. And it's going to be quite challenging for the government because the government is very unpopular. We saw that in the parliamentary elections that were just held a week or two ago, the participation rate nationally was around 42%. In Tehran, it was only 7%. So you're seeing significant voter apathy because the population has by and large lost hope that change through the ballot box actually can be achieved. And this is because of the direction that the hardliners has taken the country. They're not even allowing non-hardliners to stand for elections. So in essence, it's only an election between a set of hardliners. There's no other political options on the ballot. Is that what they will repeat now in the next 50 days? Or will they actually open it up and actually get people to once again think that perhaps the chances of change is not significant through the ballot box, but if it is, at least some degree of hope, the cost of just going and casting a vote is not that high. And as a result, turn back into trying to change the country from within through the ballot box. My bet is that most likely that is not what's going to happen, but instead they're going to be very nervous because this is all happening within the context of the potential succession to the supreme leader's position in the next couple of years, and they just want to control every avenue, every lever of power within the country by making sure that it's in the hand of a conservative. And that means that the elections in the next 50 days will essentially, if this bears out, be a repeat of these non-option elections, essentially.
And let's take it, Trita, that you're right about that and you have the expertise to be right about it, and that it continues. The regime in Iran is nervous. They don't want to let so-called moderates get on the ballot. What happens then to the discontent or the apathy that you mentioned? You know, we remember back in 2022, there were the protests after the young woman died in police custody. Those went on for some time, but as I understand it, have faded. Is there a vehicle for Iranians who are dissatisfied or unhappy with the current state of their country?
Well, here's the sadness of their situation. Not only have they lost faith in change through the ballot box, but by and large, they have lost faith in change through protest and revolution as well. Because the protests around Mahsa Amini's death did not yield the collapse of the regime. It wasn't even close to doing so. It did change a lot of things in society, and attitudes towards the hijab have changed dramatically. But in terms of actually changing the structures of power in the country, it had almost no impact. So you have a generation of very young people who have now disillusioned on both fronts, both when it comes to protests as well as when it comes to the ballot box. And as a result, I don't find it likely that we're going to see a lot of disturbances or instability and protests during these coming elections. I think it will be different, however, when the supreme leader of Iran passes away. That's a different story, because that position actually really does make a huge difference, whereas the president's position is not unimportant. But if it's just going to be a set of different hardliners, then it's going to be designed, as it was with Raisi, to have someone that essentially is pliant to the supreme leader, rather than some of the previous presidents, including hardliners, who actually were constantly at odds with him and were challenging him and left him quite dissatisfied with many of them, including Ahmadinejad.
Dr. Parsi, given the level of political disaffection that you've described, I have to ask whether there's any speculation about the cause of this accident and if anybody is alleging foul play here.
So I think ordinary people obviously would likely, there will be a tendency to think this, of course, mindful of the timing, the context, their mistrust of the government, their mistrust of their media. But it's interesting that from the government standpoint, they've been very clear, and they've been describing this as an accident. They have not even tried to blame Israel or other parties. If anything, the blame has gone to the U.S. indirectly, not because it actually did anything actively, but rather pointing to the fact that the sanctions on spare parts is a key reason, if not the main reason, as to why Iran has so many plane and helicopter crashes. And there's a reason why they're not trying to blame Israel or others, beyond whether the facts support it or not. It would be quite embarrassing for them to suggest that the Israelis actually have the capacity, after Iran had hit them with these barrage of missiles and claimed that a new equation had been established in the region and that deterrence had been restored, if within a couple of weeks of that, the Israelis actually successfully assassinate Iran's president and foreign minister. That would be hugely embarrassing, but it would also put them in a position in which they would have to respond. So I think it's quite clear they don't have an interest in that. And that's setting aside whether facts point to this direction or not. So far, we've seen nothing to suggest this. In fact, given the tremendous difficulty to find the helicopter and the fact that several aid workers were lost in the search, really does give credence to the fact that this was an accident because of bad weather, which is not in any way, shape, or form unrealistic. However, again, given the circumstances, there will still be people that will be speculating in other directions. But from the government standpoint, it's very clear they don't want that speculation. They want to make clear that this is just an accident.
In the short term, Trita, where do you see the public mood going? I mean, is this a moment where people who we can broadly term dissenters in Iran might try to might they see opportunity in this? Or is it more likely that even if you're critical of the government, you know, the human sadness of this man and the foreign minister and others being killed in a helicopter crash actually fosters some semblance of national unity? Do you think it breeds disunity or unity, in other words?
I think Iran is a very disunited country right now. It's a very divided country. This death is not going to make a huge difference in either direction, at least not internally. And when it comes to seeing an opportunity, the key problems that have existed for the protest movement is a lack of leadership on their front, and other circumstances in the country that have made it difficult for them to be able to chip away at the levels of power that the regime has, by essentially being able to get parts of the military to dissent, et cetera, or being able to mobilize unions in support of protests rather than just having protests, which the last ones were mainly by the middle class. The ones 5-6 years ago were mainly by poorer classes. There's been nothing that actually has unified them. And this death does not really change any of that. It doesn't change the circumstances that would suggest that suddenly now perhaps protests would be more successful. So I don't see a lot of appetite to try to turn this into something like that, because the opportunity for actual change, not just protests, but protests that lead to change, do not appear to be significant at this point.
Dr. Trita Parsi, thank you as always for joining us and informing us on this. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.